What's up, y'all? My name is Devontae, and I sacrificed my time so you don't have to. Timestamp right there in the pinned comment section if you want to go directly into the number 10 spot. But just to kind of give you the rules, trying to get you engaging with what I'm doing right now at the moment, as always, do me a favor. Please, 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 pretty please, with cherries on top. Pretty please with Kelly on top. Ew, gross, not Kelly. Naomi's ass on top. Yeah, let's go with that. Naomi's ass on top. Let's go with that. Don't leave timestamps. Don't be a douchebag. You can leave timestamps as far as, speaking in general, but do not leave timestamps and leave placements for each, spot within the video. You can skim through the video if you want to. No need to be timestamps. Don't be that guy. I beg you, don't be an asshole. So we're going to do a top 10 video for the worst moments in AEW history, the most controversial moments in AEW history. Now, some may say, well, Devontae, they've only been around for a little under 5 years. There's a lot that went down in this company in a little under 5 years. And if you don't believe me, stay tuned, because I got a bunch of extraordinary things that I want to talk about amongst in this top 10 list, all right? So I will say this quick, just out of the way. I'm not gonna talk about things that are overtly political. Like, for an example, Nyla Rose. I'm not going to touch on anything in regards to the fans pulling up the transgender sign or any of that nonsense. Now, there will be somewhat political topics within this top 10, but it's not going to be anything overtly political like that, because that's so damn subjective that's just, broadly, broadenly, that's how I think you say it, broadenly speaking, that can be a good thing or that can be a bad thing based off of who's talking about it. The things that I'm discussing are objectively what happened in this company, and you really can't turn a blind eye to it as far as saying whether or not it was controversial or not. That the Nyla Rose stuff, for an example, I personally don't find that controversial, but others will. But you're not important, so there you go with that. So I talked about this long enough. Yeah, it's only been 2 minutes, but that's long enough. Some of you probably are driving right now. You probably don't have a timestamp, or you can't reach your phone right now. So let me shut the fuck up right about now and get directly into this top 10 list with number 10. So we're going to kick this off with the Max Caster controversy. I doubt that you guys remember this, because it wasn't that big of a deal per se, at least amongst wrestling fans. I mean, it was for its time, and it was for that spur of the moment. I actually made a video about it. Actually, almost everything, if not everything on this list, I made a video about it in the past, whether on this channel, 1 or 2 videos, but the majority of them are from my old Millennial Smart channel. And I talked about this at the time. I was very emotional about it. I despised the censorship. I despised how they were coming after Max Caster because he was playing the character and he went too far in their eyes. But it was a situation involving Max Caster where he was deemed a misogynist and he was deemed a sexist because of what he was saying in regards to the old Duke Lacrosse situation back in, 2006, where this woman lied about these campus students on college who she alleged they baped her with an R though. They baped her. They baped the living hell out of her. She lied about it essentially. And Max Caster came out and he had this little bit of a rap, and I have it right here. I just pulled it up not too long ago. He said, and I quote, "Listen, the Acclaim kicked ass for miles, making you claim mental health like Simone Biles." That was something else that was very controversial. That line about Simone Biles and her mental health situation. Some Olympic racer, if I remember correctly, or something like that, who pulled out because she was too much of a chicken shit to actually, compete for her country. But whatever, continuing on, he said, listen, the Acclaim kicked ass for miles, making you claim mental health like Simone Biles. The Seidels is going to pay the cost. I'm gonna treat those bitches like Duke Lacrosse. The blondes say they are the best, but those dudes are faker than a PCR test. And what's that smell here in North Carolina? Oh wait, that's Julius. You can kind of see what rhymes with Carolina and try to put two and two together. Vagina! He's gonna say vagina! Well, I got a lot of heat on Max Caster. Actually, I remember hearing about him like selling his gear or selling whatever. I can't remember whether or not he got suspended for the issue, but I know he was like putting his stuff on eBay and he was really, really, really pissed off. Again, the situation in itself wasn't that big of a controversy amongst fans, but it was a huge protocol, and I remember him having to now, and a bunch of other wrestlers having to now go by their promos or go by what they're going to do in the ring with Tony Khan before going out of their way to go just do whatever they want to do. And it was just a huge situation. But yeah, it wasn't that big of a deal per se, but I felt like it had to be talked about because it is one of AEW's more controversial moments. Maybe at the very, very bottom, but still, I would definitely say it's top 10 in the entire company. So yeah, there you go. Continuing on to number 9. Number 9, this is just going to be a whole bunch of things all wrapped into one little bubble. Tony Khan tweeting in general. You can take any number of tweets. You could talk about, in my opinion, his first ever retarded tweet, in my opinion, when he started to talk about, the whole little drunk tweeting he did back in, what was it, like 2021, when he was like, AEW, we're going to beat SmackDown and all this other shit. You guys remember that? Or the tweet that he did when he was talking about how he's better than Ted Turner. I mean, that's the tweet that got all the controversy started with him and Eric Bischoff that hasn't been the same since. His tweet about bots. His tweet when he went the area Hawani, the tweet when he you guys remember that tweet he did when he was like talking about how his mom was like she almost passed away and she was like in the Mayo Clinic or something like that, and he was like at the same time dissing WWE in the same tweet because he's a clown. And the tweet a couple of months ago when he went after Shawn Michaels about being Booker of the Year, and then obviously the most recent tweet with Jinder Mahal, like, this guy and his tweeting is some of the most embarrassing moments I can ever think of that have come out of AEW. There have been some embarrassing moments, but those were more so in the moment. Those were more so in the heat of passion. Those were very emotional. These right here, most of the times one can probably say that it came from Tony Khan being either A, under the influence, which most people, they kind of go over to believing, or, Tony Khan just getting his ego tarnished and him can't handling the fact that his ego is being completely trash at that moment. He has done more damage to his company than any promoter, any CEO, any boss, any booker, however you like to refer to it, the head honcho. He has done more damage to his business than any boss I have ever seen in the history of professional wrestling. And the worst part about it is he never learns from his mistakes. He still does it to this very day. The Jinder Mahal tweet just happened a week ago. He has never learned his lesson. People talk about Donald Trump and his tweeting and how they're super happy that he has the Truth Social stuff so he can stay off of Twitter so he doesn't keep undermining his own fucking election or his presidential elections or his nominees or whatever the case may be. Someone needs to get Tony Khan his own social media website, and he needs to be on there. He needs to be tweeting into the abyss. Just give him something so he could think that he's actually tweeting out to everybody, but he's just more so just relieving frustrations, because this guy right here is a complete and utter fucking numbskull. And honestly, you could take all those tweets, wrap them all into one, shine it up really, really nice, and, you get what I'm saying, though. Him tweeting, super, super controversial, and it's one of the most preventable ones also, which makes it even more funnier. Number 8 is the Big Swole situation. I don't know how many of you guys actually remember this, because again, it's one of those situations that I won't say that it was necessarily prominent because it didn't really linger on too much, but for the most part, it exposed Tony Khan and AEW to their fans, and their fans kind of lean a little bit more progressive, a little bit more on the left-hand side. It exposed their fans as far as them because there was always this perception around AEW as far as being this inclusive brand, kind of a thing where like they always believed that AEW, they were more so on their side. They were the anti-Vince McMahon, none of the misogyny, none of the sexism and all that other kind of stuff. And with Big Swole coming out here and pretty much exposing a bunch of stuff in regards to what was going on backstage in her booking at the time that she left, because allegedly she quit AEW due to these circumstances, she went on her podcast. This was like, I think this was actually the last day. I actually remember making that video. That was like on the very, very, very last day of, 2021, if I remember correctly. Here, I'll read you an excerpt real quick. She said, outside of lack of structure, their biggest issue, which is diversity. I do not beat around the bush when it comes to diversity in my people. There is no representation, truly. And when there is, it does not come across in the black community as genuine at all. I don't know why everybody is so afraid to accept it or say it, but it's not a good look. What happens is you have this wonderful company that treats people like family, but there is nobody that looks like me that is represented at the top and in the room with them. They are not helping to necessarily influence decisions, but to explain why certain slang and certain words shouldn't be said. There is no one else who can explain our culture or experience except for us. Which prompted Tony Khan to let out one of his number 9 dumbass tweets where he says the 2 AEW execs are brown. Me, referring to himself, and Mega, who, by the way, left the company recently, by the way. Jade Cargill, Anthony Bowens, Max Caster, I'm assuming he's with Dante. I guess he's talking about Top Flight, and Darius. He didn't mention him, but Dante and Darius. Nyla Rose, Isaiah, and Mark Quinn of Private Party. He mentioned a bunch of names at the time that worked for the company. And he's essentially saying, which, by the way, they all still work, well, except for Jay, they all still work for the company, and Mega, I guess. But essentially, he was alluding to the fact that, hey, Big Swole, as the guy who actually is hiring a bunch of diverse talents and all this other stuff, you're lying and you're full of shit, which couldn't have come at the worst time, because they were dogpiling on Tony Khan, essentially saying, well, all these talents that you're naming, they're not doing anything with, which is why I said he's a complete dumb fuck. Had you came at Vince McMahon with this allegation, it would have been zip, key, lock, thrown right into the dumpster. But Tony Khan took it upon himself to actually speak on the allegations, knowing good and damn well that those talents, and now granted, in the end of the day, Tony Khan isn't wrong, but you're kind of, how can I put this? You're pouring gasoline on the fire, because at the same time, you did hire these talents, and yeah, they are on television at the time, at the very least. They weren't being used, and you pretty much flamed the fires for people to be like, oh yeah, great, you named all these people, and understand that none of these people are being used to the best of their capabilities compared to the white counterparts. And it was just a really, really fucked up situation at the time. Leo Rush jumped inside, if I remember correctly. It was just a bunch of dog shit that was going on for those couple of 2 or 3 days, and it really exposed Tony Khan to a bunch of people noticing nowadays that he doesn't take care of his women's division or give them any prominent roles. And I guess the only good thing that came, maybe the only thing within this entire list, is that the good thing that came out of this is probably it kind of like pushed him to push someone like a Swerve Strickland. But outside of that, definitely one of the more bigger controversial moments. It lasted for a couple of days too. And again, it exposed Tony Khan, and there's some other things that exposed Tony Khan to a bunch of controversies that has still lingered to this very day. Number 7 on this list is going to be the MJF Juice Robinson promo that happened a couple of months ago, back in 2023 of October. Now, this right here was more so timing than it had anything to do with it actually being legitimately controversial. Because, yeah, one can make an argument in the end of the day that you're saying things that are somewhat anti-Semitical, but it's not even so. Because here's the thing. When Juice Robinson pulled out the quarters, let me just kind of set this up for you guys if you don't remember, even though it was just a few months ago. It was a promo battle that the Bullet Club Gold were having with MJF, right? And back in the past, MJF told this story where when he was growing up, he was being picked on because of his religious background, his ethnicity, and they were throwing quarters at him because, as you guys, if you're not familiar, it's very stereotypical, because, people who are Jewish, they are stereotyped as being, money hungry and whatnot. And they were throwing quarters at MJF, essentially picking on him for being Jewish. And MJF took it upon himself to tell this story. He said it, I believe, to William Regal. I think he told this story to CM Punk also, if I'm not mistaken. He said it countless amount of times, right? And during the promo between him and Bullet Club Gold, Juice Robinson took it upon himself to pull out some quarters. Now, that was already bad enough as far as the, aesthetics that are surrounding it and the optics. But he wrote Friedman because that's MJF's name is Maxwell Jacob Friedman, which is obviously a Jewish name. And he wrote that on the quarters, which people took as being horribly anti-Semitic, and made it even worse. It was not even I think it was a few days or maybe a few weeks after the whole situation that happened with Israel during October 7th, when you had Palestinian Hamas people who, went into Israel territory and they murdered a bunch of Jewish people, right? So people were very sensitive to the topic at the time. Well, not Muhammad Hassan. I'm reading a tweet from MJF right now. MJF took it upon himself to go on social media to say that Muhammad Hassan was portraying an evil Muslim terrorist. I'm actually Jewish. I've actually gone through this. This is my real life, my story, and I look forward to giving, I'm going to botch this, catharsis, I think, to every single person who's ever been oppressed or bullied. It goes on to say more, but let me see. Bully. If you think I'd play with that or take it lying down, or worst of all, hide from the hard conversations like a coward, you're on crazy pills. I look forward to the hard conversations this starts and creates. I look forward to people being further educated. My life's work is to stand up to any and all injustices done to people due to something as stupid as being different. To anyone that thinks that can't be done through the avenue of professional wrestling, then that's an indictment on things that have happened in this sport's past. And again, it wasn't so much him talking on the subject. And yeah, obviously MJF is Jewish. He has every right to talk on this. It was more so because of the timing, because of everything that happened on October 7th to coincide with all this. On top of the fact that people, again, within the wrestling community, they're very, very sensitive when it comes to topics such as this. And it was horribly timed, and I understand where MJF was going with this, and I understand where he was getting at this. It's actually, for me, one of the few things on this list that I actually disagreed with. Not that I wanted to go on a rant or anything like this. I actually made a video. This is actually one of the few things I didn't make a video on also, if not the only thing on this list I didn't make a video on outright. But I talked about this during the whole NXT versus AEW show that happened back then at the time. I talked about this on that segment where I said that they were going to dogpile on them about this, and they're very, very lucky that, TBS and any of the Turner Broadcasting guys didn't come out and go after them a little bit harder compared to what the people in the audience were already doing at the time. It was a stupid decision. I know what they were trying to do with this. I understand that it's MJF's story and he has every right to talk about this, but the optics that surround the company at the time, it was a very, very, very stupid decision to go forward with doing the promo, and hopefully they learned their lesson from this, because that was really dumb. To the extent that Juice Robinson got hurt, I remember seeing people on Twitter still calling him an anti-Semite, as if he was the one to cultivate the entire story. It didn't benefit anyone. I know MJF was getting that, but all it did was kind of tarnish someone like a Juice Robinson in some people's eyes, because they actually believe, like a bunch of retards, that he was the one that initiated the storyline, when in reality he's nothing more than a bit player in all this. Because remember, it was all about Jay White and MJF at the end of the day. Again, horrible optics, and again, one of the more controversial, worst moments in AEW history. Number 6 was the match between Nick Gage and Chris Jericho back in 2021 during an episode of Dynamite. They had a street fight match. The storyline that was building up into this was this whole feud between MJF and Chris Jericho, where MJF, because, when he was a heel, he had like these little stereotypical things that he used to do when he feuded with people, where he would make them go through a bunch of trials and tribulations before getting a match with him one-on-one. And one of those trials and tribulations he placed in front of Chris Jericho was a hardcore match against Nick Gage, right? The match in itself isn't the problem. I mean, they did some stereotypical AEW hardcore spots that you come to expect from AEW back then and today, to be quite frank. It was actually a spot that came when Chris Jericho, or I think it was Nick Gage, who pulled out a pizza cutter. I can't remember which one did it on the other, but they essentially pulled out a pizza cutter and they used it on one and another, or one on each other. And when they used it, it was right at the time a Domino's pizza commercial came on. Now, I don't know if they timed it like that or if it's a coincidence, but they did that. They used a pizza cutter on each other at the time where a Domino's pizza commercial was being rolled right there on the picture by picture thing. And right after the match happened, a spokesperson, and I got the quote right here, a spokesperson from Domino's, I'm quoting them, but they talked on the situation. They essentially said Domino's was not involved nor had any foreknowledge or of the gory scene on the AEW Dynamite main event Wednesday night that showed wrestler Nick Gage, it was Nick Gage, okay, apparently slicing Chris Jericho's head open with a pizza cutter. We share the concerns expressed by this incident in the content of this TV 14 rated program and are assessing our advertising presence on it going forward. Now, I don't remember whether or not they pulled it, but I know they threatened to pull it, and there were a bunch of people within the TBS, or I guess Turner Broadcasting family, who were furious at the spot, to the extent that I don't know if it had anything to do with Nick Gage never coming back to AEW, because we haven't seen him since. And usually when they do stuff like that, they bring people in that just have a little bit of a spot here and a spot there if they're not too old. They tend to have a fixture on AEW. Go back in the past and look at guys, for an example, like Eddie Kingston, right? They tend to have a spot going forward on the card, but they didn't do that with Nick Gage. I don't know if that had anything to do with TBS probably, or Turner Broadcasting saying that they don't want Nick Gage ever on their television again. I don't know, but yeah, that was a horrible moment, and that could have done some real damage to their television deal that came up around that time. And quite frankly, it could have done some damage to the company, big time damage, just for doing spots in the ring. Am I right? Yeah, I'm definitely right. Number 5, the Matt Hardy concussion situation that took place at All Out back in 2020. Now, this one was one of the first instances where people started to call AEW super duper careless and super duper dangerous, and pretty much for the most part saying you go there if you want to die. There was a bunch of memes that was going on during that time when Matt Hardy had a horrific, terrible, by far one of the most cringiest, mind-numbingly stupid fucking... So, let me set this premise up for you real quick, because it goes a little bit deeper. It wasn't just this. I know you guys probably don't remember this, because this was almost 4 years ago, but remember the whole Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara arc. Let's call it that. I don't want to call it a feud, because they didn't really do anything worth calling it a feud. They only did some stuff for about 2 or 3 weeks. Because the whole reason as to how this had even started up was, so Sammy Guevara and Matt Hardy were having a brawl on one of the episodes of Dynamite during the COVID era. And it was a spot where Sammy Guevara picked up a chair, and he essentially just lawn darted the chair at Matt Hardy and just split his shit to the white meat. Now, at that time, I'm not sure if he got a concussion, but Sammy Guevara completely fucked up Matt Hardy. He was on a mission to murder Matt Hardy is what it seemed like. So that was already bad enough. That was the stance. That was the beginning of what started all of this to happen, right? The feud in itself, calling Sammy Guevara a dangerous worker because he was careless as fuck. And then we get to the actual All Out pay-per-view in itself, where they were doing a spot. I can't remember if it was on a ladder or if it was like on a truck or something like that. They were in an elevated position, right? And there were tables down below that was supposed to cushion Matt Hardy's fall. Well, mind you, this is on concrete. This is backstage. He took a flat back bump off the ladder through the tables, but he missed the tables, like a majority of the tables, if I remember correctly. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And the back of his head smacked the concrete and knocked him completely the fuck out. Like, he was stiffing up and everything. It was so motherfucking scary. It was horrific. Terrible. As a matter of fact, not to kind of like overshadow this a little tiny bit, but speaking of overshadowing, this is one of the first instances of MJF being overshadowed. This was him, if I'm not mistaken, I think this was the night he got his first title shot ever at the AEW World Championship when he took on, was it Jon Moxley, I think? I don't know if it was the main event, but he took on Jon Moxley at this event. It was one of the first instances, if not the very first instance, where we had this running gag of MJF being overshadowed by so many things on a show during his run as a champion, or going after the championship in itself, or just anything that's supposed to be spotlighting MJF on. But yeah, that was fucking horrible. And again, it just had a stigma going forward when talking about AEW and all their talent for the most part being completely careless. I remember Jim Cornette ripping AEW and Sammy Guevara to shreds over this whole shit. It was really scary though. Very, very scary. But yeah, definitely controversial. Definitely top 5. Especially because if I'm not mistaken, I think they let the match continue, which made it even worse. I think the match actually continued. Yeah, when I say it out loud like this, yeah, they're fucking lunatics. Especially all the concussion protocols going for it. Fucking lunatics. But yeah, that's number 5. Number 4, and one of the worst moments in AEW history, because for the most part, this was the bloodletting in my opinion. This is when WWE started to kind of change the ties. Now, it wasn't straight up, because even in my opinion, around this time, I thought AEW was better than WWE, but this was damn sure the starting point. This was the landmark point when you started to see the ties sort of kind of change a little bit back in the WWE's favor as to where it is right now, currently at this moment. Cody Rhodes left AEW, which was a huge shock to everybody. Now, we knew that there was trouble in paradise between Cody Rhodes and a bunch of the EVPs at the time. I heard rumors that they were in different locker rooms, that they were traveling in different, buses and all this stuff, and how they were having meetings in different rooms and all this, one might even say childish bullshit. And, the writing was on the wall when it came to Cody Rhodes. And then obviously with CM Punk at the time coming back a few months prior to that, there were rumors going around that Cody Rhodes, he was looking for a raise, but he didn't get it. And when you think about all the stuff building up to this, the writing was definitely on the wall. And Cody Rhodes took it upon himself to leave in the beginning of 2022. And man, it hasn't really been the same since, now has it? Now Cody Rhodes is getting ready, from what it looks like, to go into WrestleMania to maybe face Roman Reigns. We're going to put a pin on that. Come back to this video in a few months. We'll talk about it then. But yeah, Cody Rhodes leaving AEW was I'm not going to say it was a death blow to AEW, because it certainly wasn't, but it definitely was. It was a comet that hit the earth. It's going to wipe out the species on Earth, but it ain't going to destroy Earth in itself. It was a huge blow to Tony Khan, and quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a huge blow to his ego, because here's a guy that was one of your EVPs that helped created the company that left to your op. That's a very, very, very bad look from an optical standpoint, and that's what Cody Rhodes did. And I feel, quite frankly, it was that point right there that kind of led into everything else that happened in 2022, and pretty much kind of set the feel for what was going to come in 2023, which in my opinion is AEW's worst year from a financial standpoint, from how they look as far as I would say characteristics, but that word again, optically, and just overall how cold the company got going forward in 2023. And just one of those things that they took Cody Rhodes and they made him a way bigger star than where he was in AEW, and that was just, man, again, not a death blow, but definitely a harsh blow. Number 3, and probably the most recent controversy, the Chris Jericho and Kylie Ray situation. I made a whole video on it about 2 weeks ago, so if you want to go check it out to get more of a deeper, detailed analysis in regards to that, go check out that video. I think it's actually my most popular video on this channel, so just, hit popular and just kind of siphon through that, at least at the point of this time. I don't know, it'd be ironic if this video ended up being the most popular, right? But no, the whole situation, kind of giving the footnotes on everything, is, well, okay, so you had Jim Cornette and his lawyer who was talking about the whole stuff that happened backstage, because CM Punk and Ace Steel, they ended up getting Stephen P. New as a lawyer, and all this stuff happened, them talking on Twitter, and the subject of NDAs were brought up in regards to the situation, and Chris Jericho, for some damn mind-boggling reason, back on Christmas, stuck his nose in this situation, and he essentially said that he didn't sign an NDA, implying that he's seen everything and that he could talk about everything without being under the court of law. And Stephen P. New reminded him that, well, I think you don't have to sign an NDA outright because it should be in your company handbook, right? Which Jericho went on a huge rant about NDAs and all this other kind of stuff. And out of nowhere, Nick Hausman, which, by the way, he'll play a part later on in the list also, he spoke up and he talked about the fact that Jericho allegedly has some NDAs signed from other wrestlers separate from the issue, which started this whole controversy of people trying to figure out what is Nick Hausman talking about. And comes Kylie Ray into the whole situation, which is alleged one of the people that Jericho has signed an NDA. And people speculated, why did he have her sign an NDA? And now there's a bunch of allegations about Kylie Ray and what happened backstage. There are rumors talking about him sexually assaulting Kylie Ray. There are people saying things like, Jericho has an open relationship and how he wanted to have a bit of a fling with Kylie Ray and she denied him, and all this stuff happened and she left the company because she was bothered by it. And Tony Khan is implicit in this because he's hiding the information rather than speaking on it. And it's a big, big thing currently at the moment right now, to the extent that you have Jericho, anytime he shows up, they're lowering volumes, they're editing how the crowd reacts, during the whole what was that show called again? The World's End show. They were booing him because of the situation. It's just an all out, no pun intended, terrible look for the company. And it's even coming at the hands of one of the more prominent people within the company who, for the most part, Jericho has always been that guy to never get himself involved with controversies, which makes it a little bit much worse, because it's like, okay, how much has he been getting away with this entire time? That's not me saying it personally, but this is how everybody is talking amongst the situation. And it just makes Tony Khan look like an enabler within the company because he's not speaking upon it, and it kind of seems like he's hiding a bunch of things. And to this very day, right now, as we speak, it is still lingering over the company. And it seems like no one can do anything about it, and they feel like if they can just go out of their way and just play stupid the entire time and not speak on it, that they can get away with essentially what people would deem murder. And in my opinion, sorry about the car in the background, and in my opinion, I think there's a bunch of other things that are going on with this. I feel like, we should probably wait for evidence to come out to suggest what the hell actually happened, but that's not the case currently at the moment. And it's one of those situations, probably the only thing on the list, where we just have to wait to see how that plays out, and again, come back in a few months and talk amongst each other in the comment section if this played out a lot worse than I see it playing out at the moment. But yeah, Kylie Ray, Chris Jericho, that whole thing going on currently at the moment, definitely top 3 biggest controversies in AEW history. Probably the most scandalous thing that ever happened to AEW in their history of the company, easily. Number 2, CM Punk fired after a fight with Jack Perry backstage during the All In show at Wembley Stadium. So there's so much things to go through in regards to the build up to all this. We're talking about CM Punk coming back after being gone for about 9 months or 10 months, something along the lines of that, because of I think it was because of an elbow injury or a shoulder injury, but I could be wrong. Could be, I don't know. He was injured the entire time though. He comes back, he makes a bunch of sly remarks in regards to the Young Bucks, all this tension building up essentially because of the stuff that happened prior to all of this. And CM Punk essentially, pretty much laying down the law. He gets his own show in Collision. He returns back to Collision. And again, like I say, he's laying down the law. He's kind of being a douchebag to certain people. He's essentially firing people, or not firing, but telling people can't show up to the buildings. People like Ryan Nemeth, Dolph Ziggler's brother, essentially saying someone like a Christopher Daniels, he can't be on Collision because if his friend Ace Steel couldn't be, in the building for Dynamite, then they don't want Christopher Daniels, their equivalent, I guess, to an Ace Steel. They don't want him in the building. Just a bunch of petty shit, right? But the entire time, CM Punk is still trying to play this role in his mind as far as being this locker room leader, right? And there was a situation where Jack Perry, who wanted to use real glass in the situation in one of his matches, he was told no by the higher ups. People speculated who was the higher up that told Jack Perry no as far as using the glass. It ended up allegedly being CM Punk, or at least one of the people being CM Punk, right? Well, CM Punk Jack Perry had a match at the Wembley Stadium show where he did a spot. I can't remember who he wrestled, but he did a spot to one of the wrestlers on a car, if I'm not mistaken, right? And he spoke into the camera and allegedly he said, "Cry me a river, real glass," or something along the lines of that. Not speaking verbatim here, right? Well, when he comes backstage, I'm assuming CM Punk is already mad because he already seen what happened. And Jack Perry, he has his chest all out, and I think they bumped shoulders in the hallway. And one thing led to another, and they started to fight. Samoa Joe broke it up, and there was a bunch of hullabaloo, television monitors flying everywhere. CM Punk allegedly punched them and choked out Jack Perry, or at least had him in a headlock. He got the best of Jack Perry, essentially, right? And Tony Khan the entire time was allegedly, scared for his life. He feared for his life, according to him, because CM Punk, he had a bunch of not so safe for work language to say to Tony Khan, and he was furious at him. He wanted to fight him. At least that was what was being alleged backstage, that, CM Punk turned his aggression to Tony Khan, that he went backstage and he started to snap, and a bunch of shit happened during this, and it was just craziness, pure craziness. Jack Perry ended up getting kicked off the show. Well, not kicked off. I think he was told to leave because he already had his match already, obviously. And CM Punk went on to go have his match with Samoa Joe. Afterwards, Tony Khan came, because this was like building up. This was anticipated for the most part for CM Punk to snap like this. And it came at a crossroads where Tony Khan essentially came on AEW. Well, first I think he came on the stage for one of the AEW shows, and he essentially just started to let everybody know that, because I think they were in Chicago, he started to talk about CM Punk and how he's no longer here, how he's fired, and, just letting them know that, hey, I don't know what you want me to do. This is the situation. This is what happened. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I did do. And essentially he fired CM Punk. And when he had like his whole, now I guess you can consider it infamous now in AEW history, his infamous "I was scared for my life" promo that he had at the beginning of the show for one of the Dynamites or Collisions, I can't remember. And yeah, that right there, most people will say that right there was the nail in the coffin for AEW. They have not been the same since. One can argue that they were still at the very least hanging by a thread for most fans, at least fans who were more casual to the product, not the diehards. And for them, CM Punk getting fired and no longer being with the company was the straw that broke the camel's back. And from that point right there, I would definitely say it was a footnote, because I would definitely say right there, that was the point. AEW was already suffering for a guy like me reviewing the shows, but it was at that point right there where they were never really the same again. Since that September period, they've been bad in the past, but it was right there where they have just been consistently cold the entire time. And all the momentum just swing, the pendulum just completely swing. It was already going back into WWE's favor, but the pendulum just completely flat out swung back in WWE's favor. And again, AEW hasn't been the same since. And what really kicked this all off, in my opinion, which I think no one will argue with this, because this is pretty objective, was the number one spot, which is Brawl Out 2022. Did you guys think it was going to be anything else? Of course, it had to been Brawl Out. This right here is what started everything. One can argue that Cody Rhodes leaving AEW was a precursor, but the stuff that happened with CM Punk and Hangman Adam Page and the rest of the Elite, that right there is what kicked off the downfall of AEW, in my opinion. It was that point right there. That's what kicked off the downfall. And what initiated this all goes right back to May. It was a promo between Hangman Adam Page and CM Punk building up into their Double or Nothing match, right? Where Hangman Adam Page took it upon himself to kind of shoot from the hip, brother, and he started to insinuate a bunch of things about CM Punk in regards to workers' rights and other bullshit nonsense that had me confused, like completely confused, saying things like CM Punk, he's not gonna suck the life out of the company, alluding to a bunch of things. I'm just like, what the fuck? I was at the time, I remember I made a video on it, and I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck he was talking about. I thought they were actually playing, because it was so fucking random, because they're both baby faces. It was so random. I was looking at the situation at the time when I talked about it during the review, and when I made a separate video from it, I don't know what Heyman Adam Page was alluding towards at all. I still don't know to this very day what the fuck he was alluding towards. Maybe he was, at the time, I think I speculated that he was talking about Colt Cabana and him no longer being on the show, and they were good friends with Colt Cabana. It was something along the lines of that, if I remember correctly, that I was speculating on. But as time starts to go on, CM Punk, he gets injured, he comes back, because I think Heyman Adam Page says some more stuff, I can't remember. But essentially, CM Punk comes back, and he's feuding with Jon Moxley now. And he kind of lights the fire up again. He pours gasoline on that dying fire. He throws timber or ember on it or whatever. And he essentially shoots from his hip, and he sits in the ring during this promo battle with Jon Moxley. And Heyman Adam Page not being in the company or not being in the building at the time, he starts to call him out. He starts to call him out on his name. And it's like, he makes him look bad because he's not there in the building, and it makes him look like a pussy. It makes the Hangman Adam Page character look like a pussy. And it was obviously done from Punk's whim. Like, no one told him to do that, and he did it, right? And then he had this promo battle with Jon Moxley where he completely destroyed him. I don't care what anybody says. That Punk promo battle with him and Jon Moxley, he made Moxley look like a complete and utter bitch. But some things that he was saying, like, he was kind of getting under Jon Moxley's skin, which I'm pretty sure Jon Moxley wasn't taking to heart too much because, you know, in the end of the day, Jon Moxley, he's a tough son of a bitch from a mentality standpoint. But, you know, you look at what happened a little bit after how, you know, the brawl out stuff in February, you know, you can see now that was actually legitimate heat between Punk and Moxley also, because Moxley wanted to do certain things in regards to the finish of the match with Punk at All Out, and, you know, I think he was trying to do this Rocky Balboa thing, but Punk wasn't for it, and it pissed Moxley off, and not to mention, you know, the whole controversy with Punk constantly talking shit online and stuff like that. Moxley just didn't like Punk at all, and this builds up to this crescendo. So, we have this media scrum right after the All Out event, right? And CM Punk, bloody all up, towel over his neck, you know, the infamous shot with him sitting there eating fucking bakery goods right next to Tony Khan, who looks just completely like done. Like, he looks like he's just done with all of this. He looks like he's done with life. CM Punk gets asked the question by Nick Hausman, our local shit starter, if you go back to the Chris Jericho spot. I told you he'd come up later. And he asked him about, you know, I think he was going to ask him a question, and then CM Punk kind of flipped the script, and he mentioned Colt Cabana being friends with him, which Nick Hausman denounced. He said he's no longer friends with Colt Cabana because of a personal situation. And, you know, Punk took it upon himself to use that moment to shoot on a bunch of people. He took that moment to shoot on Colt Cabana about the legal stuff and they're falling out from their friendship. He took that and he started to talk about Adam Page and him being a fucking loser and all this other kind of stuff. And then he took that time to shoot on the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, as far as saying they don't have a fucking clue how to run a wrestling business and all this stuff. And one of the key lines he dropped in that was, if you have anything you want to say, you know where my locker room is, come say it to my face. Which then he left the table. He went to his locker room. There was, in his locker room, you had, you know, Ace Steel and his wife Lucy, and I think his dog was there, if I remember correctly. And all hell broke loose, essentially. The Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, you know, some people say that they barged in the locker room. Some people say that they knocked on the door and then Punk started swinging. What's consistent as they came in the room with that Mega lady who left, and all hell broke loose. CM Punk allegedly threw the first punch, and there was this chaos everywhere. You had, you know, people arguing, fists being thrown, chairs being thrown, people being bitten, and all this other kind of shit. And at the time, I don't know if this exasperated Punk's shoulder injury, but it didn't matter, because this whole situation was one of the biggest blemishes, not just on AEW, but in the history of professional wrestling. Now, one may argue that, okay, well, Devontae, we've had backstage fights all the time in professional wrestling. Yeah, but the only difference is this one, A, is happening in a very sensitive time in society, and B, it's recorded. Not recorded physically, but recorded in the sense that we can leak this to social media. And it's just so unbecoming of a wrestling promotion in today's world that, like, it just left such a huge blemish. It was an embarrassment on AEW. It was an embarrassment on Tony Khan. It was an embarrassment on professional wrestling as a whole, one can argue, just because we now live in a time where, again, not just the sensitiveness of society, but just objectively speaking, we live in a time where professional wrestling is looked at as far as being a little bit more business oriented, right? It's a little bit more respected to a certain degree. Now, obviously not respected to the degree that people find it more entertaining, but respected in like a business acumen type of way, right? And to see all this happening on a mainstream professional wrestling company, it was outright embarrassing. And one can argue right there, that we talk about the pinpoint times as far as what started everything, what kicked off everything. This right here kicked off the downfall for AEW. It was a domino effect that led into CM Punk being fired. It was a domino effect that kind of kept up with the trend of overshadowing MJF. A bunch of people were upset as far as how they felt about in regards to the treatment of CM Punk. Some people don't even care about AEW, they care about CM Punk in itself. And it just soured a bunch of people in the company at that time. So For sure, that has to be number one. I can't think of a worse moment in AEW history than the Brawlout stuff. Because people may say number one is CM Punk being fired, but think about it this way. Had it not been for the Brawlout, CM Punk probably wouldn't be fired right now. Because I would assume if he got into the situation that he's in right now with Jack Perry and all that other stuff, that situation, if it even occurred, because I still think some of the stuff stemmed off the Brawlout stuff that kind of got him, kind of jacked up to want to have a fight with a Jack Perry. All of that stuff that occurred right there, if for anything else, that would have been CM Punk's first warning. But it was a second. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Finally got it. Took me all week to get that shit right. But yeah, that's definitely number one, and that's going to do it for the top 10 worst moments in AEW history. Do you guys got some moments that you feel should have made the list? Do you feel that, hey, Devontae, you missed this point right here. Hey, Devontae, I don't understand why you're focusing on this point right here when this point was a little bit more important there, boyo. Go ahead, let me know in the comment section below. I'm definitely going to care. I'm definitely going to look at your comments, and I'm definitely going to argue with you because I'm that kind of guy. Do your thing, chicken wing. As always, my name is Devontae, and I'll be catching you fine gents later. A deuces and a P. Eyes.